So, uh, what if I told you that the little black pupil, like right in the center of your eye,
Yeah.
and the absolutely terrifying light-swallowing event horizon of a supermassive black hole out in deep space, what if I told you they were actually doing the exact same mathematical job?
I mean, it sounds completely absurd at first,
Right.
right?
It sounds like pure science fiction.
Yeah.
But welcome to this custom deep dive. We are just incredibly thrilled you're here with us today because we know you. We know you are that specific type of learner who really craves the deepest why behind the how.
Yeah, the kind of person who wants to understand the absolute bleeding edge of reality, but, without getting completely buried under a mountain of chalkboard math.
Exactly. So today we're opening up this undeniably fascinating, totally mind-bending document. It's titled The Biological Cosmos, and it outlines this proposed framework known as the XV theory. And our mission for you today is massive.
Oh, it really is. It's a heavy lift.
Yeah, by the time we're done here, we are hoping to completely shift your paradigm. We want to take that old, centuries-worn view of the universe. The one that says everything around us is just a cold, dying machine, like a giant cosmic clock just ticking down toward an inevitable thermodynamic oblivion, and we want to replace it.
Right. Replace it with a vision of the universe as a living, breathing, generative biological process.
Which is just wild to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to connect the extreme gravitational physics of black holes to the intimate biology of human conception.
Yep.
We're going to compare the cosmic web of galaxies to the neurons in your brain. And maybe most provocative of all, we're going to explore the actual proposed physical mechanics of the human soul.
It is, it's a radical departure from everything we were conventionally taught in school. And just to set the stage for you, the text we're analyzing today, it doesn't come from a single experimental laboratory.
Right, no petri dishes here.
Exactly. You can't put this theory in a lab. Instead, it's a profound logical synthesis. It takes the established theories from some of the most brilliant scientific minds of the last century titans, really, like Albert Einstein, Leonard Susskind, Lee Smolin, Sir Roger Penrose, and it weaves them all together.
And that's what I love about this, because classical science, by its very nature, it generally stops at the how, right? Like, how does gravity work? How do cells divide?
Yeah, exactly. Classical science is very descriptive.
But this document attempts to question the why. It connects the dots between quantum physics, neurobiology, cosmology disciplines that, quite frankly, they usually refuse to speak to each other in the academic world.
Oh, they actively avoid each other, yeah. But it's a sweeping journey from the absolute macro to the deepest micro. But to even begin to understand this, we first have to tear down a philosophical wall that has defined human thought for hundreds of years.
Right. The text calls this the death of mechanicism.
Exactly. For centuries, I mean, starting roughly around the time of Isaac Newton and René Descartes, humanity has viewed the cosmos essentially as a vast mechanical clockwork.
A bunch of lifeless gears.
Right. We picture a collection of lifeless gears governed entirely by blind chance. And in that model, human beings are nothing more than a biological accident. Just a random, highly improbable spark of consciousness, totally lost in this dark, indifferent void.
Which is just an incredibly lonely way to look at reality. Like you're just a speck of dust on a slightly larger speck of dust.
It really is.
But the XV theory argues that this mechanistic view isn't just depressing, it is fundamentally scientifically flawed. And to prove it, the author points to something we do every single day in the modern world, which is human engineering.
This is a great point in the text, yeah.
Right. If you think about it, when an aeronautical engineer wants to build a highly efficient airplane, they don't, start from scratch. They go and study the aerodynamics of an eagle's wing.
Yep, they look at nature.
And when computer scientists want to build an advanced learning AI, they design artificial neural networks that physically mimic the human brain. We aren't actually inventing efficiency. We're just, identifying and copying structures that nature has already perfected to manage stress or process data.
Which is fascinating when you really unpack it.
So my question when I was reading this was, well, why? Why does nature stubbornly repeat these exact same structural forms across completely different scales? From bird wings to microchips, why the repetition?
Well, the text introduces a critical concept to answer that, and it's called isomorphism.
Isomorphism, okay.
Yeah, isomorphism essentially means the legacy of forms. It posits that geometry isn't just random shapes occurring in nature, Geometry is the physical manifestation of a universal logical law.
So it's not an accident that things look alike?
Not at all. Nature is, above all things, a ruthless economist. It doesn't waste its energy or its creativity coming up with redundant custom solutions for every single problem. When any system, and it really doesn't matter its size, when it needs to manage a massive flow of energy or data, the underlying laws of physics impose a specific architectural form. It does not matter if that system is a collapsing star in a distant galaxy or a biological organism perceiving things on Earth. The physical laws act as a cosmic DNA.
Okay, wait, I want to make sure I'm grasping this. You're saying that if the fundamental job is the same, the shape literally has to be the same, regardless of whether you're looking through an electron microscope or, like, the Hubble Space Telescope.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it, yeah. A matrix of instructions just forces matter into a specific mold.
Wow. Okay, so what's an example of this mold?
Well, one of the most prominent repeating shapes that nature utilizes for really heavy lifting is the funnel. The text refers to this specific isomorphic geometry as the gate.
The gate, like a funnel.
Think about water draining in a sink or a tornado or even the shape of a spider's funnel web. Whenever the universe needs to channel a critical, overwhelming mass of raw data or energy toward a single processing point.
So whenever it needs to translate external chaos into internal order.
Exactly. It relies on this funnel-shaped geometry. It creates a point of no return, a threshold where disorganized information is tightly compressed so that it can be transformed into something else.
Which, I mean, that takes us straight from abstract geometry to the most terrifying extreme objects in the entire cosmos.
Yeah.
If we're looking for the ultimate funnels in the universe, we have to talk about black holes.
We absolutely do.
But I realized, reading this, that before we can even talk about what a black hole looks like or how it functions as a gate, we have to fundamentally understand what it actually does to the things that fall into it. And to do that, the author takes us on a slight detour into something called the Information Theorem.
Right, and the Information Theorem is arguably one of the most astonishing and unyielding principles in all of modern quantum physics.
It really threw me for a loop.
In simple terms, it states that the universe does not know oblivion. Reality is an immense, indestructible archive.
Nothing gets deleted.
Nothing. No interaction, no matter how small, can ever be truly erased. Every physical state, every arrangement of atoms, it all leaves a permanent, indelible mathematical mark on the fundamental fabric of reality.
The document uses a really grounded, everyday example to illustrate this, and it helped me immensely. So imagine you're holding a single sheet of paper with a poem written on it, and you light it on fire.
Right.
As you watch it burn, common sense tells you the paper is gone. It turns to ash and smoke. The poem is destroyed. But physics says no.
Physics strongly disagrees, yeah.
The heat that is released into the room, the specific wavelength of light emitted by the flame, the microscopic chemical changes in the ash, the slight shift in the air pressure, all of that scattered data contains the exact mathematical information required to perfectly reconstruct that piece of paper and the words on it.
It's all still there.
The form changed wildly, but the underlying information, the memory of the paper, remains completely intact in the universe. The books always balance.
And that uncompromising cosmic accounting is exactly where we run into a monumental, decades-long crisis in physics.
A paradox.
Yes. For a very long time, the prevailing scientific consensus, which was championed heavily by the brilliant Stephen Hawking in the 1970s, was that black holes were basically bottomless pits.
Right.
Hawking's early math suggested that whatever fell past the event horizon was destroyed forever. It just vanished from the universe. But as we just discussed, if you destroy information permanently, you violate the information theorem.
You violate the core rules of quantum mechanics.
Yep.
Because if I throw my piece of paper into a fire, I can technically get the information back from the smoke and heat. But if I throw it into a black hole, Hawking was saying the smoke and heat coming out the Hawking radiation is totally random.
Exactly. He said it was wiped clean.
So the books don't balance anymore.
Precisely. Hawking argued that the radiation leaking out of a black hole was purely thermal, meaning it carried no complex information about what fell in. And this contradiction sparked what physicists call the black hole information paradox.
Which was a huge deal.
It was a legendary intellectual war, primarily between Hawking and another titan of physics, Leonard Susskind. Susskind simply could not accept that information was lost. He believed that the mathematical coherence of the universe demanded that reality cannot afford to forget.
Right.
If quantum mechanics was right, the information had to be there. And out of this intense debate, Susskind developed something revolutionary, the holographic principle.
Okay, I've heard that phrase thrown around in sci-fi, but how does it actually resolve the paradox? Like, if the black hole isn't a cosmic shredder, what is it? Because Susskind essentially claims it's a hard drive, right?
A hard drive is an excellent conceptual bridge, actually.
Mm.
Susskind proposed that the event horizon, the invisible spherical boundary of the black hole, the point of no return, is not a gateway to a destructive abyss. Instead, it is a highly active memory membrane.
A memory membrane.
Yeah. When a three-dimensional object, let's say a star or an asteroid, crosses that horizon, its physical structure is mathematically compressed and encoded as two-dimensional information directly on the surface of the event horizon. Every single particle, every quantum vibration of the object is smeared out and written onto that 2D surface. And as the black hole swallows more matter, that surface area literally grows to accommodate the new data, exactly like a hard drive physically needing more sectors to hold more files. The black hole does not destroy, it meticulously archives.
Wait, let me stop you right there because this is wild. You're saying that a 3D object falls in, but all the information that makes up that object is flattened into 2D code on the outside shell of the black hole, like a hologram.
Precisely like a hologram. Think of a credit card hologram. It's a 2D surface that contains all the necessary information to project a 3D image. Susskind realized the universe might operate on the exact same logic.
Okay, and this is where I get stuck. Even if the black hole is archiving everything on its surface, black holes don't just sit there eternally. We know they slowly evaporate over billions of years through Hawking radiation. So if the hard drive eventually melts away, what happens to the archive?
And that is the pivotal question. That brings us to a quiet but incredibly decisive figure in this history, a physicist named Don Page.
Don Page.
Yes. Don Page was actually a close colleague and former student of Stephen Hawking. But despite that closeness, he had the mathematical rigor and, frankly, the intellectual courage to challenge his mentor's conclusion about information loss.
It takes some nerve.
It really does. Page mapped out a mathematical model that is now famously known as the Page curve.
Okay, let's unpack this. I need a breakdown of this curve. What does it actually map?
It maps the information content of the radiation leaving the black hole over its lifespan. According to the Page curve, for roughly the first half of a black hole's life, the radiation it emits is indeed mostly random. Just as Hawking predicted, it looks like noise.
Okay.
But right at the midpoint, a moment we now call the Page time, something profound happens. The black hole reaches a point of informational saturation.
So it's all...
Essentially, yes. The radiation it emits suddenly stops being random and begins carrying highly structured, entangled information. The black hole is gradually, methodically returning what it absorbed back into the cosmos. Cosmic memory proves to be stronger than gravitational destruction.
So the hard drive is basically downloading its contents back into the universe before it unplugs itself.
Yes.
That is the classical accepted view now, right?
Right, yeah.
But reading the XV theory, it takes this accepted model of black hole evaporation and introduces a massive structural twist. The classical view says the information just linearly leaks back into our universe, but the text proposes something entirely different happening inside the singularity.
It does. It goes a step further.
It suggests that inside the black hole, the energy density and the informational saturation becomes so impossibly extreme that classical relativity just breaks down. The space-time literally cannot compress any further. It hits a wall.
Yes, and to really understand this, we have to touch upon a framework called loop quantum gravity.
Loop quantum gravity.
Yeah. In classical physics, we tend to think of space as a completely smooth, continuous fabric. Like you can theoretically zoom in infinitely. But loop quantum gravity suggests that space is actually quantized. It's pixelated.
Pixelated space.
Yeah. There is a fundamental limit to how small space can get, composed of tiny, discrete loops of gravitational fields.
Okay, so space isn't a smooth sheet of rubber. It's more like a digital photograph.
Yeah.
If you zoom in enough, you eventually hit the individual pixels.
Exactly. Now, imagine a collapsing star inside a black hole. Gravity's crushing it smaller and smaller, but eventually it hits those pixels of space.
Oh, wow.
It cannot be compressed any further. The fundamental geometry of space rebels. And when it hits that absolute limit, it doesn't just stop. It rebounds violently. It acts like a maximally compressed coil spring being suddenly released. This is known as the quantum bounce.
And what happens when space-time bounces back from infinite compression? Like, where does that energy go?
It triggers a local Big Bang.
A Big Bang inside the black hole.
Yes. But importantly, because the geometry inside the black hole is so heavily distorted, this Big Bang does not happen back in our universe. The repulsive force of the bounce actually inflates a newly generated separate region of space-time. It creates a child universe, branching off from our own.
Wait, so the black hole is a conduit, it's a bridge?
It is a reproductive portal.
It's a reproductive portal.
Yes. And if we connect this to the information theorem we just discussed, it elegantly solves the problem of what happens to all that compressed data. The new child universe acts as the pristine repository for all the structured information that was encoded on the event horizon.
But hold on, I see a contradiction here. If the information and the energy are blasting into a new child universe, why do we see black holes evaporating in our universe? Like, what is the Hawking radiation actually doing here if the contents are going somewhere else?
That is a very sharp question. The XV theory suggests that the evaporation we observe, the Hawking radiation leaking into our universe, is merely a thermodynamic residual balancing term.
A residual balancing term.
Think of it like paying a toll. The black hole in our universe must slowly lose mass to satisfy the strict laws of conservation of energy here, allowing the topological gateway between the parent and child universes to eventually close definitively.
Oh, I see.
The evaporation is just the physical act of returning the change to the parent universe, while the core, highly structured information survives, evolves, and expands in the child universe.
That completely flips the script. The black hole isn't an executioner, it's a cosmic seed. It's literally reproduction.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, that forces us to ask a terrifyingly big question. If universes are born from the black holes of previous universes, how did our universe get here?
Right.
How did our specific physical laws, like gravity, the speed of light, nuclear forces, how did they get dialed in so perfectly to allow us to exist?
And to answer that origin question, the theory incorporates the groundbreaking work of theoretical physicist Lee Smolin. Smolin proposed a paradigm shift called cosmological natural selection.
Cosmological natural selection.
It is a breathtaking concept where the laws of physics essentially become subject to the laws of biology and evolution. Smolin looked at our universe and asked a really simple question. Why do we live in a fertile cosmos?
What does fertile mean in this context? Like biological life?
Well, a fertile cosmos is one whose physical constants are perfectly balanced to allow for the generation of massive stars, complex chemistry, and eventually, yes, life.
Okay.
If the physical constants were just slightly different, we would live in a sterile desert of scattered freezing gas. Smolin reasoned that if black holes generate child universes, they act as gravitational wombs.
So universes are reproducing. But how does that explain why our laws are so perfect? In biological evolution, creatures adapt because of genetic mutation and survival of the fittest. Does a universe have DNA?
In a functional sense, yes, it does. Just like in biological reproduction, the newly born child universe inherits the genetic code of its parent, namely the fundamental physical constants.
Right.
It inherits the specific strength of gravity, the mass of an electron, the strength of the strong nuclear force. But crucially, the violent quantum mechanics of the bounce introduce tiny random variations. These are the multiversal equivalent of genetic mutations.
Okay, I want to visualize this. What does a birth defect look like for an entire universe?
Let's say a child universe inherits a mutation where gravity is vastly stronger than it is in our universe. Almost immediately after its Big Bang, that immense gravity crushes all the expanding matter back in on itself. A big crunch.
So it just collapses immediately.
Right. That universe dies in infancy. It is sterile. Alternatively, imagine a universe where the nuclear force is too weak. Hydrogen atoms can never fuse together.
No fusion.
Without fusion, stars can never ignite. It remains a dark, cold cloud of gas forever.
And if it can't form stars, it can never form massive stars that collapse into black holes. Yeah. It has no reproductive organs, so it leaves no descendants.
Exactly. This introduces selective multiversal pressure. A fertile universe, like ours, inherited a highly specific set of mutations that perfectly balance gravity and expansion.
Right.
It generates billions of massive stars, which means it eventually creates billions of black holes, and therefore it gives birth to billions of descendant universes. Over an incomprehensible stretch of multiversal time, the universes that are best at reproducing naturally become statistically dominant.
So when we talk about the Big Bang that started our universe, calling it a random explosion is completely missing the point. In fact, the text explicitly says calling it an explosion is a semantic error.
It is entirely inaccurate, yes. According to this biological framework, it's much more precise to view the Big Bang as an extreme stretching of space, a process that is perfectly isomorphic to mitosis.
Mitosis, as in cellular division.
Yes. Think of a human zygote right after conception. It undergoes rapid, exponential cellular division to create the biological space required for complex organs to form. In both the cosmic and the biological case, you have an initially infinitesimal unit that exponentially expands. It distributes its primordial code, the physical constants, or the DNA across a vast canvas, creating a stable theater where structures can eventually differentiate and grow.
That is staggering.
Yeah.
Just absolutely staggering. But reading Smolin's original theory, he sort of views this all as a blind mechanical process of physics, right? Like universes making stars to make black holes to make universes. In his view, biology, as life on Earth, is just a random byproduct. We just happen to live in a universe tuned for stars.
That was his stance, yeah.
But the XV theory goes a massive step further. It completes this thought with a concept it calls a biological coincidence. And for me, this was the absolute turning point of the whole document. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It really is a realization that changes how you view your own existence. Let's look closely at the physics here. A fertile universe requires a meticulous, razor-thin balance between the crushing inward pull of gravity and the outward explosive pressure of nuclear fusion in order to generate massive, short-lived stars.
Right?
Those massive stars are required because they're the only things heavy enough to eventually collapse into black holes.
Right, the reproductive organs of the universe.
Exactly. But here's the coincidence. The intense stellar nucleosynthesis occurring in the core of those massive stars, the exact process required to eventually create a black hole, is the exact same and only physical process in the entire universe capable of forging heavy elements. Elements like carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and iron.
Wait. The fundamental scaffolding of all living beings. So without those massive stars trying to become black holes, there is no carbon. And without carbon, there is no biology.
None. Zero. Life is not an alien guest or a random fluke in a dead machine. The exact physical constants required to maximize the procreation of the cosmos are, by strict thermodynamic necessity, the exact constants that enable the complex chemistry of life.
That is unbelievable.
Smolin saw biology as a lucky byproduct of black hole creation, but the XV theory argues the inverse consciousness is the actual goal.
Consciousness is the goal.
The universe is undergoing a semantic evolution. It's actively trying to maximize its own capacity to organize and experience information.
So it is literally a cosmos trying to wake itself up. It needs biology to perceive itself. And to ground this massive philosophical idea, the text brings us right back to isomorphism, that idea that nature repeats successful shapes and structures. It gives us two mind-bending empirical comparisons between the macro universe and the microbiology of our own bodies.
Yes, these examples are incredible.
Let's look at the first one, the galactic web and the human cerebellum.
This is where the theory moves aggressively from theoretical philosophy into empirical, measurable observation. Recently, an astrophysicist named Franco Vatsa and a neurosurgeon named Alberto Folletti teamed up to conduct a quantitative analysis.
Which is a crazy team-up, by the way.
It is. They directly compared the cosmic web, the vast, sprawling network of galaxies and dark matter threads that make up the universe, to the neuronal network of the human cerebellum.
I have to ask, how do you even begin to measure or compare a galaxy to a brain cell? The size difference is incomprehensible.
Well, the scale difference is roughly 27 orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
So yeah, massive. But they weren't comparing the physical size, they were analyzing the network topology, the parameters of connectivity.
How things link together.
Exactly. They used computer models to measure how nodes connect to filaments, how information and energy flow through the network, and the specific density of the connections. And what they found shocked the scientific community. Both systems exhibit a distribution of matter and a network logic that optimizes information management in nearly identical ways.
They share almost identical parameters of memory capacity and structural connectivity. So, structurally speaking, the universe looks and acts like a giant brain.
Yes, the universe, at its absolute largest perceivable scale, behaves structurally like an immense neural apparatus.
Wow.
And the human brain acts as a summarizing microcosm, an isomorphic mirror that faithfully replicates that exact same network logic on a biological scale. It suggests that complex information isn't just a byproduct of matter information, it's the fundamental ordering principle shaping both the cosmic void and your brain tissue.
That completely reorganizes how I think about looking up at the night sky. Like you're looking at a brain. But the second biological comparison in the text might be even more visceral, because it happens right on our own faces. It looks at the body's own personal, literal black hole, the pupil of the human eye.
It is a breathtaking example of functional convergence. Think about what the pupil actually is. It's not a black spot painted on your eye. It is an empty hole.
Right.
It does not emit any light, it only absorbs. It is a one-way biological portal designed exclusively to capture photons. Once light crosses the threshold of that dark chamber, it bounces around the interior of the eye and cannot escape back out.
It functions identically to the event horizon of a black hole. Light goes in, it doesn't come out.
Exactly. But the truly radical nature of this comparison is what happens next, the mechanism of transduction.
Transduction, okay.
We discussed earlier how the black hole translates chaotic stellar mass and energy into highly organized bits of 2D quantum information on its surface, right?
Yep, the hard drive.
Well, the pupil operates on the exact same logic. It captures the chaotic, disorganized, energetic radiation of the external world, bouncing photons, channels it through the funnel to the retina, and translates that chaos into highly organized bioelectrical impulses that the brain can read.
They're doing the same mathematical job. One is a cosmic funnel that feeds structured data into the fabric of space-time, and the other is a biological funnel that feeds structured data into the fabric of human consciousness.
Precisely. They are both gates. They are translating entropy into order.
Okay, if the universe is literally structured like a giant brain, and our eyes are functioning like event horizons pulling in data, what exactly is the human mind doing with all that data? Like, what is consciousness? Because if you ask a classical neuroscientist, they basically treat consciousness as, well, highly evolved brain juice.
Brain juice, yeah.
A really complex accident of chemistry and electricity firing in the dark.
And that is exactly where classical science hits a solid brick wall. They call it the hard problem of consciousness. You can map every neuron, you can track every electrical impulse, and you can run algorithms on the brain all day long. But no classical algorithm, no matter how complex, can explain the subjective experience of reality.
Right.
It cannot explain intuition or sudden leaps of creativity or qualia, the sheer internal feeling of experiencing the redness of a sunset or the pang of nostalgia. A computer can identify red, but it doesn't experience red. The human mind is unequivocally not a biological Turing machine.
So if it's not a computer program running on wet meat, what is it?
This brings us to a revolutionary framework developed by Sir Roger Penrose, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and Stuart Hameroff, who is a prominent anesthesiologist.
An anesthesiologist and a physicist.
Yes. Together, they developed what is known as the Orch-OR theory, orchestrated objective reduction.
I'm going to need you to translate that.
Yeah.
And Penrose is a physicist, not a biologist. What is he doing theorizing about the brain?
Well, Penrose essentially looked at the brain and said, we are looking in the wrong place. The root of awareness isn't happening in the chemical connections between the neurons. It is happening in the fundamental geometry of space-time inside the cells.
Inside the cells.
Yes. They focus their attention on structures called microtubules.
What exactly is a microtube?
Imagine the internal scaffolding of a building. Microtubules are tiny, cylindrical protein structures that form the internal skeleton of every neuronal cell in your brain.
Okay.
For decades, classical neuroscience assumed they were just structural girders holding the cell's shape. But Orch-OR proposes that they are actually genuine quantum processors.
Oh.
The individual proteins that make up these tubes, called tubulins, are so small that they can exist in a state of quantum superposition.
Superposition meaning they can be in multiple states or positions at the exact same time, right? Like Schrodinger's cat.
Exactly. They act as biological qubits. Millions of these tubulins enter a shared quantum state. And when that fragile quantum state eventually collapses, when the superposition reduces to a single, definite reality in a highly orchestrated way, it creates a discrete moment of consciousness. Consciousness is a rapid-fire sequence of these quantum collapses.
And Hameroff, the anesthesiologist, brought the medical proof to back this wild physics claim up, right? The connection to anesthesia blew my mind.
It is the most compelling medical clue we have. Think about anesthesia. We use it every day, yet conventionally, we don't actually know how it turns off consciousness.
We don't.
No. We know it shuts down awareness completely, but it miraculously does not shut down the brain's non-conscious regulatory functions. Your heart still beats, your lungs still breathe, the neurons still fire.
Right.
Hameroff noted that anesthetic gases bind precisely to the hydrophobic pockets within these microtubules, mechanically disrupting their ability to sustain quantum coherence.
So the anesthesia literally jams the quantum vibration. It stops the collapse from happening.
Precisely. Anesthesia doesn't turn off the brain. It physically unplugs the brain from the quantum realm. Therefore, consciousness is not a product of chemical software. It is a fundamental physical phenomenon occurring at the Planck scale.
You've mentioned the Planck scale a few times. For the listener, what is the scale we're talking about here?
The Planck scale is the absolute basement of reality. It's the smallest possible measurable distance in physics, billions of times smaller than a proton. It's the scale where the smooth fabric of space-time breaks down into a bubbling quantum foam. Orch-OR suggests that consciousness is woven directly into that foundational geometry.
But if consciousness is a quantum function happening at the literal basement of reality, how is any of it connected? If my brain is doing quantum physics and your brain is doing quantum physics, how do we communicate? How am I connected to the world around me?
And this raises one of the most profound questions in physics, the nature of distance and connection. In 1935, Albert Einstein and his colleague Nathan Rosen wrote a paper showing that the math of general relativity allowed for spacetime to fold onto itself, creating a shortcut, or a tunnel, between two vastly distant regions.
We call this an Einstein-Rosen bridge, or more commonly, a wormhole.
Mm.
Sci-Fi 101, the tunnel through space.
Exactly. But for decades, it was considered merely a macro-mathematical curiosity, totally separate from the microscopic quantum world. However, recently, Leonard Susskind, who we discussed earlier, and physicist Juan Maldacena proposed a mathematical equation that shook the foundations of physics.
The equation is ER-EPR.
Yes, ER-EPR, incredibly simple.
I know ER stands for Einstein-Rosen, the wormholes. What is EPR?
EPR stands for Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen. It was another paper written in 1935, this one detailing the phenomenon of quantum entanglement.
Entangle.
Yes. Entanglement is when two particles become so deeply linked that changing the state of one instantly changes the state of the other, even if they're billions of light years apart. Einstein famously hated this. He called it spooky action at a distance because it seemed to violate the speed of light.
So Susskind takes the wormhole paper, ER, and the entanglement paper, EPR, and puts an equal sign between them. He's saying they are the exact same thing.
He proved that an Einstein-Rosen bridge and quantum entanglement are literally two faces of the exact same geometric phenomenon. When two microscopic particles are entangled, they are not communicating via invisible magic. They are physically connected by a microscopic, real geometric wormhole in the fabric of space-time.
Let me make sure I'm getting this. You were saying that space isn't empty distance. If two things interact, a literal microscopic tunnel connects them. Distance is just an illusion based on our perspective.
Absolutely. Reality is not a mosaic of isolated, independent objects floating in an empty void. It is a dense, hyper-connected fabric of invisible geometric relations. Objects do not define the relations define the objects. Everything that interacts is fundamentally tethered together at the Planck scale.
Which brings us to the grand synthesis of this entire staggering theory, the physics of the human soul. Because the universe is reproducing through black holes, and our minds are quantum processors tethered to the geometry of space-time through microscopic wormholes, what exactly are we? Because the XV theory doesn't treat the soul as some religious metaphor or a spectral ghost. It treats it as hard physics.
It completely redefines the concept of the soul as selfhood, a highly complex, resilient architecture of structured quantum information. And to understand how this selfhood survives the chaotic reality of biology, we have to look at something physicists call exotic matter.
What makes matter exotic? Like, what does that mean?
Well, in theoretical physics, if you want to create a wormhole, you run into a massive problem, which is gravity. A wormhole is a tunnel through space, but the mass of the space-time itself creates immense gravity that will cause the tunnel to instantly collapse under its own weight the millisecond it opens. The only mathematical way to keep a wormhole propped open is to thread it with something that possesses negative energy density. This is exotic matter.
A negative energy density.
Yeah. Instead of pulling things in like normal gravity, it exerts a negative pressure. It pushes outward. An anti-gravity effect.
And the XV theory uses our rule of isomorphism to map this cosmological math directly onto human biology.
Exactly. Think about the human body. It is subject to immense biological gravity, the relentless forces of decay, entropy, and constant cellular death. Over the course of a few years, almost every single atom in your body is shed and replaced by new atoms from the food you eat.
Right, you're literally rebuilding yourself.
You are a completely different physical machine than you were 10 years ago. Yet despite this constant biological turnover, your core identity, your continuous stream of memories, your selfhood remains entirely coherent. Why doesn't your identity collapse under the crushing weight of biological entropy?
Because the soul acts as that exotic matter.
Yes.
It is the negative density force. It's the outward pressure that pushes back against the biological decay, keeping the wormhole, the bridge of your continuous identity, open and stable. as the physical cells die and replace themselves around it.
It stabilizes the consciousness system. The soul is not a glowing vapor inside a shell of flesh. It is an invisible, undeformable, geometric architecture made of quantum information.
It's an undeformable structure.
Yes. And this aligns perfectly with the work of quantum physicist Federico Faggin, who actually developed the first commercial microprocessor.
Oh, interesting.
Faggin argues that consciousness and selfhood represent an irreducible, non-clonable quantum code. Because of the no-cloning theorem in quantum mechanics, your specific quantum state cannot be perfectly copied. You are mathematically unique.
So if the soul is a unique, undeformable quantum code, how does it get here in the first place? How does it interface with a wet biological body? And this is where the theory elegantly circles all the way back to human procreation. The text boldly states that human reproduction is the fractal biological replica of the cosmic Big Bang. It is a local singularity.
Consider the isomorphism we've built. A dying massive star collapses, compressing its mass infinitely to tear open a wormhole tunnel toward a brand new space-time universe. Now look at human conception. It is a massive concentration of dense biological information.
Right.
You have the collapse of two unique exotic matter codes, the DNA and quantum state of the parents, converging into a single microscopic point. That convergence opens a tunnel, a new event horizon, directly into material reality.
So parents aren't just assembling a flesh machine from protein. They are triggering a
Precisely. They construct a new, localized event horizon. Conception is the exact instant that a unit of consciousness drops its anchor into our specific space-time. The parents provide the physical hardware, the biological interface.
But what is running on that hardware? The text outlines this process in a section called the Theorem of Selective Informational Recursivity. And this is, for all intents and purposes, the actual physics of the afterlife, or rather, the afterlife of information. Let's walk through this step by step. Let's say we have a brand new person. The text calls them entity C.
Yes, let's track entity C. C is the biological synthesis of their two parents. Now, C lives their life. Over decades, they accumulate experiences, emotional attachments, grief, joy, memories, what philosophers call qualia.
Qualia, right.
This constant friction-filled interaction with the physical environment massively stratifies their internal complexity. Through experiencing life, they undergo a structural, mathematical mutation of their underlying quantum code. By the end of their life, they are no longer entity C, they have evolved into entity D.
Entity D is essentially C 2.0. They have been upgraded by the data of a lived life. But eventually, biology fails.
Yeah.
The entropy wins. The body dies. What happens to the code?
Well, when biological death occurs, the physical brain stops functioning. The microtubules we discussed earlier can no longer sustain the energy required for quantum coherence. But crucially, remember the information theorem.
Information cannot be destroyed.
Exactly. The complex information that makes up entity D cannot be erased from the universe. Instead, the quantum information undergoes a process called decoherence. The selfhood is smoothly released from the failing biological hardware and unbound back into the foundational cosmic network at the Planck scale.
So it's uploaded back to the universe's hard drive.
In a geometric sense, yes. But the immense structural complexity reached by entity D creates an informational pressure. It will inevitably seat a new biological hardware system capable of processing its massive informational load. It essentially seeks a new resonant frequency match.
And it finds that match in a new conception happening somewhere else. A new local Big Bang generated by two new parents whose specific biological and informational synthesis creates a frequency that perfectly accommodates the complexity of D. The selfhood tunes itself to this new biological matrix, integrating all its pre-existing encrypted experience with a brand new physical interface.
Exactly. It's an incredible cycle of recursive upgrades.
Which brings up an incredibly emotional question. What happens to the people we love? Like, if we die and our codes decohere into the cosmic network, are we just isolated packets of data forever? The text explores this in a concept it calls the refining, and it ties right back to ER, EPR, and quantum entanglement.
This is perhaps one of the most beautiful and profound implications of the entire physical theory. If two entities shared a truly profound bond in life, if they truly loved or deeply interacted or even profoundly conflicted, their exotic matter codes exchanged sensitive data streams. In the language of physics, they created a strong quantum entanglement bond.
They literally built microscopic wormholes between their individual codes. They are physically tethered at the quantum level.
Exactly. And when biology fails, when they die and their selfhoods are uploaded into the cosmic network, that specific entanglement bond is not broken. Quantum entanglement is immune to biological death.
Immune to death.
Yes. It acts as a specific informational gravity. Across new space-time coordinates, across entirely new biological contexts and lifetimes, the trajectories of these two codes will be magnetically pulled to converge again.
So when you walk into a room, meet someone for the first time, and feel that instant, undeniable, unexplainable connection.
The theory suggests that is not a random psychological coincidence.
It's the physical collapse of a wave function.
Yes. Your quantum sense processors are instantly recognizing the overlapping resonance of ancient frequencies. The mathematics of reality dictate that no true evolutionary bond is ever severed by time or space. You will always gravitate towards the nodes you are entangled with.
Wow. I mean, we started this deep dive by talking about the old mechanistic view of the universe. The idea that classical physics looks at reality like a broken X-ray machine, only capable of seeing the dead mechanics, the jagged bone, the lifeless gears. But by walking through the XV theory, we are seeing a universe that is desperately, aggressively alive. We are not foreign, accidental observers trapped in a dead, ticking cosmos. We are autonomous, localized universes floating within a vast macro universe.
It's a complete shift in perspective.
We are the literal sensory organs of the cosmos. We exist so the universe can look through our eyes, measure its own harmony, and interrogate its own destiny.
We are the exact biological means by which the universe is trying to wake up. The ultimate aim of cosmological natural selection isn't just to blindly manufacture more rocks and burning gas. The aim is the infinite expansion of self-awareness.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today, but it leaves us with an absolutely staggering final thought to ponder. If cosmological natural selection dictates that universes constantly reproduce and refine their physical constants generation after generation to maximize complexity and biological consciousness, what does the next multiversal evolutionary leap look like?
It is the ultimate provocation of the text. If the overarching trend of the cosmos is toward ever greater informational efficiency and structural organization, are we inevitably heading toward a future descendant universe where consciousness is so perfectly stabilized, so mathematically robust, that it no longer requires biological hardware at all?
A universe without biology.
Are we evolving toward a universe made entirely of pure, living thought?
It makes you look at the stars completely differently, doesn't it? You look up into the night sky, and you're not seeing a cold, mechanical clock ticking down to zero. You're looking at a vast living genealogy, a massive reproductive cycle of meaning and memory. I encourage you to keep questioning the why behind the how. Thank you so much for diving deep with us today.